Hank dismissed any hint that Walt could be involved. Remember when Hank found the lab notebook and put it down to some other cook? He even saw the initials WW.
WW. I mean, who you figure that is? Woodrow Wilson, Willy Wonka, Walter White.
You got me. Ding, 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 ding. That boy is right on the money, man. You got me.
You got me.
Hank Schrader, the relentless DEA agent who spent years hunting down the infamous drug kingpin Heisenberg without ever realizing he was sitting across from him at family dinners. Why? Was it pride? Was it trust? Or was it the simple fact that Walter White was the last person he'd ever expect? Today, we're breaking down Hank's battle of finding a ghost hidden in plain sight. Let's get into it. Why did Hank never see the truth about Walter?
If you don't know who I am, then maybe your best course would be to tread lightly.
Tread lightly.
How could one of the Drug Enforcement Agency's top agents miss the truth right in front of him? Hank Schrader had the instincts, the experience.
The image that Walt gave off this weak, sad, depressed, dying man. And that image right there in itself made Hank think Walt wasn't even capable. Hank didn't even believe that Walt had it in him. Image is everything.
Hank Schrader had the instincts, the experience, and every clue he needed.
He did.
Yet he never saw the criminal mastermind hiding in his own family. Now, if you've watched Breaking Bad, you've probably wondered, how could this happen? I'm Dr. Patrick Kingsep. Today we're looking at the psychology of denial, why Hank Schrader couldn't recognize the truth about Walter White, and what this reveals about the blind spots we all have.
I'm going to learn where Hank went wrong, try to apply that to my life.
All have.
Because at the end of the day, it's just
Now,
human
thinking about
nature.
it, have you ever overlooked something that deep down you just knew was real?
Yes.
A warning sign in a relationship, or a difficult truth you weren't ready to face.
Yes.
Hank's story isn't just fiction. It's a powerful example of how denial can shape our choices and perception. So let's break down what denial really is and why it has such a hold on us.
Okay.
Hank's blind spot with Walter White isn't just about missing clues. It shows us how our minds can deceive us. Think about confirmation bias. That mental trick where we only see things that back up what we already believe.
Confirmational bias. When we only see the things that back up what we believe, ignoring the obvious. A lot of people can relate to confirmational bias. They're probably in a relationship, they see the red flags of the girl. They probably peep the bad, they don't want to fully investigate it. Or anytime they see her doing good that backs up them thinking that she's a good girl, they go 100% at that. Man, confirmational bias will kill you.
Where we only see things that back up what we already believe. For Hank, that belief was simple. Walt was a family man, a simple, somewhat boring chemistry teacher.
Yep.
It's why even when strange things started happening, Hank dismissed any hint that Walt could be involved.
Yep.
Remember when Hank found the lab notebook and put it down to some other cook? Never even considering that his own brother-in-law might be tied to it. He even saw the initials WW and joked about it being Willy Wonka.
WW. I mean, who you figure that is? Woodrow Wilson, Willy Wonka, Walter White.
You got me. Ding, 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 ding. That boy is right on the money, man.
Walter White.
You got me.
You got me.
It's that confirmation bias at work, letting Hank brush off the possibility that the enemy could be so close to home. Nah, it's not happening here.
It's not.
And then there's normalcy bias, the brain's way of convincing us that life will keep rolling on as usual. To Hank, his world was ordered. Criminals were out there, and his family was safe. So when Walt starts showing an unusual interest in Hank's investigation, asking probing questions about Heisenberg, Hank shrugs it off.
Yeah, he does shrug it off, but also in the show, Hank brings Walt along in a lot of his investigations. He's already giving him a lot of information without Walt even asking. To him, it's probably just Walt just interested in it. Hank fucked up bringing Walt along into his investigation, so in his point of view, when Walt just asks it, he just thinks, oh, okay, he's just more interested in it. He doesn't really think, why is Walt asking me all these questions?
Hank shrugs it off. His brain can't reconcile that the same person sharing family dinners could be the man he's chasing.
For real.
The tragedy is that these biases aren't just
My
quirks,
man Gustavo.
they're defenses. Hank's mind clings to the comfort of seeing Walt as harmless because facing the truth would tear his whole world apart.
It would.
Ironically, this very denial meant to protect him is what allows Walt's empire to thrive. Our closest relationships can twist our perception.
It can.
The emotional bond makes it nearly impossible for Hank to view Walt objectively. Think back to that episode in the hospital after Hank's attack, where he's really vulnerable and thankful to have Walt by his side.
But your heart's in the right place, man. Your heart's in the right place. We love you, man. We love you. Everybody, to Walt, Nostrovia.
To Hank, at that moment, Walt isn't just family. He's a source of comfort and support. For Hank,
Walt was really one of the only people in the whole world Hank could really like trust and look for comfort in. He needs somebody to talk to, he would go to Walt. It would have torn Hank's whole world apart. Any sign that it could be Walt, he would immediately brush it away because literally that's just psychology of humans.
at that moment, Walt isn't just family.
Yep.
He's a source of comfort and support.
And you do not want to lose
For
that.
Hank, this reinforces a belief that Walt is someone to rely on, not someone to suspect.
What, you lose your hair, you go on a couple stakeouts, so you what, you're Kojak?
This connection taps into a psychological phenomenon called willful blindness. It's a defense mechanism where we subconsciously ignore things we don't want to face.
A lot of people have willful blindness. A lot. It could be in school, work, relationships. They just don't want to face the truth.
It's a defense mechanism where we subconsciously ignore things we don't want to face. If Hank allowed himself to believe Walt might be Heisenberg, it would destroy his idea of family and love and
would.
loyalty. So without realizing it, Hank's mind shuts out the uncomfortable signs, letting him hold on to the safer version of who he thinks Walt is. This emotional bias doesn't just cloud his judgment. It completely blocks his instincts as a drug enforcement agent. And Walt, sensing Hank's loyalty, uses it to stay hidden, knowing Hank's view of him as family will protect him from suspicion. In the end, Hank's bond with Walt isn't just a blind spot. It's the very thing that stops him from seeing the truth, showing how our strongest connections can sometimes be our biggest weaknesses.
Showing how our strongest connections can be our biggest weaknesses. Hank, it would literally turn his world upside down if the only man he could come to was the man he was spending all his energy chasing after. Because after that, who can I trust? But as a DEA agent, you would think he already knows. Trust nobody. Trust nobody. But just family, he peeped the signs, but it was just like, it just can't be true. It just can't be true. But you know what? It was true. Gus didn't have that problem. If you fucked with Gus, he would just off your ass.
Showing how our strongest connections can sometimes be our biggest weaknesses.
It can.
Now, Hank's identity was deeply tied to his
Tough.
job.
That boy look
to
tough
being
right
the
now.
guy who could track down the worst criminals. To admit that his brother-in-law was the mastermind he'd been chasing all along would shatter that image.
Horribly.
Remember when Mary urges Hank to tell his work colleagues that Heisenberg is Walt?
You gotta go in with this, Hank.
Look, the day I go in with this, that's the last day of my career. I'm going to have to walk in there, look those people in the eye, and admit that the person I've been chasing the past year is my own brother-in-law.
Now, psychologically, this taps into something called ego defense mechanisms. Hank's mind does what it can to protect his sense of self, his image as a sharp, skilled, respected agent. For so long, instead of seeing the truth, he rationalizes, thinking, Walt could possibly be the guy. This isn't just denial. It's Hank's ego at work, subconsciously justifying his blindness, because facing the truth would mean admitting he'd been completely fooled.
Yup. Hank's image in the show Breaking Bad was he was the toughest, strongest, stoic, never deceiving. All his effort went to nothing just because he overlooked his brother-in-law. That was your brother the whole time? You were supposed to be top G, top dog. And you couldn't even see yourself. That was your brother? Ego defense mechanism. Protecting self-image. Image is everything.
Subconsciously justifying his blindness, because facing the truth would mean admitting he'd been completely fooled.
Yep.
There's also a bit of projection happening here.
Okay,
Hank
some
channels
projection.
his frustration over the elusive Heisenberg into every suspect, every other lead, while completely missing the one person who doesn't fit his mental picture of a criminal. Hank's need to protect his own pride as a top drug enforcement agency agent stops him from seeing the uncomfortable reality about Walt.
The uncomfortable reality is the truth, and he was avoiding the truth. Walt in his head was everything but the image of Heisenberg, and how life works so crazily. Guess who was Heisenberg?
Showing how sometimes it's our own sense of self that blinds us. Hank's denial hits its breaking point when he discovers the Leaves of Grass book. This moment isn't just a plot twist, it's a full-blown psychological crisis. Up until now, Hank has been able to live with two separate beliefs. Walt as his family and Walt as someone harmless. But now faced with the truth that Walt is Heisenberg, these two beliefs collide, triggering what's called cognitive dissonance.
You hiding something?
It's that gut-wrenching feeling when what you thought you knew comes crashing down and your mind struggles to make sense of it. In that unforgettable scene where Hank picks up the book and the realization dawns on him, you can see the shock and the disbelief all over his face. This isn't just about uncovering a criminal. It's about realizing that someone he loved and trusted has deceived him on the deepest level. The mind doesn't just switch gears easily here. Hank goes through the stages of denial, almost like a grieving process.
When you are supposed to be a top DEA agent, you are supposed to be on top of human nature. You are supposed to be able to remove your emotions from your thought process. And the whole show, until he found that fucking book, he wasn't on it. He thought he wasn't.
Hank goes through the stages of denial, almost like a grieving process. At first, there's pure shock, almost like he can't accept what he's seeing. Then, as reality sinks in, there's a painful shift towards anger. The ultimate confrontation with Walt is when Hank's denial finally shatters. It's a moment of reckoning, where the illusions he held onto for so long dissolve, leaving nothing but the raw truth. After Hank discovers the truth about Walt, his world doesn't just change, it shatters. The emotional journey he goes through mirrors the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally,
Acceptance.
Initially, Hank is stuck in a state of disbelief, but as the shock fades, it gives way to raw anger. We see this in scenes where Hank's frustration boils over.
Man, look at that nigga's face, bro. He looking at him like, oh my, man, the actor, I'm gonna look up his name, but the actor behind Hank, like the actual actor, he did one hell of a job. Like showing the true emotion of like the whole show ending up to here. And you see his face right there?
His frustration boils over and his sole focus becomes bringing Walt down. He's no longer the funny guy. His face is set in a look of absolute desperation and rage. It's no longer just an investigation. It's personal. The betrayal he feels drives him to the point of obsession. To the point where he's willing to risk everything to expose the truth. Hank's acceptance of who Walt really is changes him completely. He's no longer just a drug enforcement agent doing his job. He's a man on a mission, determined to right the wrong that's been done to him and his family, no matter what the cost. This determination becomes a fatal flaw. Hank's acceptance of the truth reshapes his behavior and goals, leading him into dangerous territory with a relentless, all-consuming drive to bring Walt to justice. In the end, Hank's story isn't just about his inability to see Walt for who he really is. It's a powerful reflection of a struggle we all share.
We do.
Denial isn't just a weakness or a flaw. It's a defense, a way our mind protects us from the truths that could shatter the lives we know.
But the truth is what you need. The truth will set you free. Because at the end of the day, Hank's job as a DEA agent is to catch the guy, no matter who it is. And the truth is just so unbearable. But as the top DEA agent, the top dog, you gotta put your emotions to the side. It's not gonna be easy, damn sure. We saw how it played out. The lies we tell to ourselves. ourselves.
A way our mind protects us from the truths that could shatter the lives we know. For Hank, denial kept his world intact,
It did.
right up until it couldn't anymore. But Hank's journey forces us to ask ourselves, what uncomfortable truths might we be ignoring in our own lives?
For real.
What parts of our reality are we choosing not to see because facing them feels too hard,
It's never going to be too hard.
disruptive? Hank's tragic downfall is a reminder that sometimes the biggest lies are the ones we tell ourselves.
Damn! On the money, on the money, on the money. Sometimes the biggest lies are the ones we tell ourselves. Ding, 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 ding. It's all human psychology.
It's a reminder that sometimes the biggest lies are the ones we tell ourselves.
They are.
You want me to beg? You're the smartest guy I ever met. And you're too stupid to see. Do what you...
That was the saddest death.
Well,
That was
thanks
one of the
for
saddest
watching.
deaths.
Now, if this video made you think, leave a comment below.
This was an amazing video. Amazing video. Sometimes people just think that human nature is the best thing for us. Human nature, at most times, is just self-defense mechanisms. But those self-defense mechanisms can be the things that literally lead to your disaster. The whole show up until the ending, Hank had multiple things. Multiple subconscious things leading him away from the truth about Walter. Normalcy bias, willful blindlessness, ego defense mechanisms. All that added up together till he came onto a cognitive dissonance. Sometimes the biggest lies are the ones we tell ourselves. And that right there is a self-defense mechanism to keep ourselves feeling okay and happy. But the life we live is not always going to be up and happy. But the human body, it wants to stay up as much as possible. But when you're down, that's when you see the truth. And the truth will set you free. It's PhilosopherNas. Follow my socials right on top of me, and I'm going to catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.